I never thought a single sentence could burn itself so deeply into my mind that it would replay every night before I fell asleep. But hers did. "I won't date the cleaner." She said it like it was the simplest fact in the world, like she was rejecting a dish at a restaurant. No malice, no emotion, just dismissal. My name's Adam, and back then, I worked part-time as a janitor at a private college. I wasn't a student there. I couldn't afford tuition, but I spent every evening mopping their floors, cleaning their classrooms, and pretending that one day, somehow, I'd be on the other side of those desks. I met Lily during my second month on the job. She was studying architecture, always sketching buildings that looked too perfect to exist. She had that kind of effortless confidence that comes from never worrying about rent, or late fees, or whether you'll have enough for groceries at the end of the week. I used to see her in the library, head buried in her notebook, earbuds in, humming softly while I emptied the trash bins. At first, I didn't even think she noticed me. Most people didn't. But one evening, as I was wiping down the tables, she smiled, said thank you. A small thing, but to me, it meant the world. Over the next few weeks, we started talking. Small things, at first. I'd ask about her projects, and she'd ask if I liked working there. I lied and said yes. It felt nice. For a while, it didn't matter that my uniform smelled faintly of bleach, or that I could only afford gas because I skipped dinner twice a week. We laughed. She told me about her favorite cities, about how she wanted to design a building that would make people feel small but safe. I told her I just wanted to make something of myself. Then one day, a group of her friends walked in while we were talking. They looked at me, really looked at me, like I was invisible until that moment. One of them whispered something, and Lily's face changed. Her smile faded, and the air between us turned heavy. When they left, she didn't look at me again. Later that night, I saw her outside the library. I tried to talk to her, asked if everything was okay. That's when she said it. "I won't date the cleaner." She said it quietly, but it hit like a slap. I remember just standing there, mop in hand, watching her walk away. And something inside me broke. Not because she rejected me. I'd been rejected before, but because of how she did it. Like my worth had already been decided by the uniform I wore. That night, I sat in my tiny apartment, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My hands were rough, my clothes cheap, my eyes tired. I hated what I saw. But more than that, I hated how right she was. I was a cleaner. That was the label. That was my identity. For weeks, I replayed that moment over and over, each time trying to think of something I could have said to defend myself. But nothing came. The truth was, I couldn't argue with her, because deep down, I didn't believe I was worth more than that job. Until one night, when the supervisor told me they were cutting shifts. Budget reasons. Suddenly, I wasn't just a cleaner, I was an unemployed cleaner. I had $73 in my account and a landlord who didn't care about excuses. That night, I realized something. If people like Lily saw me as invisible, then maybe I needed to stop trying to prove them wrong and start proving myself right. I didn't sleep. I sat there with my laptop, looking up free courses. Anything I could learn. Web design, marketing, coding. I found an online class that offered a certification if you completed all the modules and passed the test. It wasn't fancy, but it was a start. So I cleaned during the day, bathrooms, offices, sometimes construction sites, and studied at night. I barely ate. I barely talked to anyone. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was moving forward. Months turned into a year. I passed the test. I built a few websites for small businesses, charged next to nothing just to build a portfolio. I watched YouTube tutorials on marketing, took notes during lunch breaks, and sent out emails every night, hoping someone would give me a chance. Most ignored me. Some laughed, but one didn't. A local bakery needed a website, and the owner liked my design. Paid me $400. That $400 felt like $1 million, not because of the money, but because it was the first time I'd earned something from my mind, not my hands. After that, things started to shift, slowly, painfully, but surely. By year 3, I had steady clients, small businesses, mostly, but they referred others. I learned branding, social media management, and advertising strategy. I turned my tiny living room into an office with one used desk, a second-hand chair, and a cheap laptop that overheated every hour. Then, I landed a deal with a startup that needed a full rebrand. It was my biggest project yet, and it changed everything. They paid me $12,000. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was living. I moved to a better apartment, got a decent car, built a small agency, hired a couple of freelancers. My clients grew from local businesses to companies that actually had marketing budgets. But despite everything I'd achieved, that one line, "I won't date the cleaner," never left me. It stayed, burned into the back of my skull, not as pain anymore, but as fuel. By the 5th year, I wasn't the same man. I'd grown my agency into a full creative firm. We handled campaigns for international brands. I traveled. I wore suits that actually fit. I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the man staring back, until one night, I got an email. It was from Lily. She said she'd seen my name in an article about local entrepreneurs under 30. She congratulated me, said she was proud, and added that she was in town for a while if I wanted to catch up. I stared at that email for a long time. The same woman who once dismissed me like I was nothing, now wanted to meet. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Another part of me wanted to rub it in. But the truth was, I was curious. So I replied, "Sure," I wrote. "Coffee works." And that's where everything changed again, though not in the way I expected. I arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early. It was one of those sleek, minimalist places with big windows and a constant hum of soft jazz in the background, the kind of spot where people wore expensive watches and pretended to work on their laptops while scrolling social media. I ordered a black coffee and sat by the window. I didn't know what to expect. Part of me hoped she'd changed, that maybe she'd apologize or at least acknowledge how cruel she'd been. Another part of me didn't care. I wasn't here for validation anymore. I just wanted to see how I'd feel standing face to face with the woman who once made me hate who I was. When she walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. Lily still had that same confidence, but there was something different now, an edge that wasn't there before. Her hair was shorter, her clothes more polished, but her smile was forced. "Adam?" she said, her eyes widening slightly. I stood up, extended my hand, and watched her hesitate for a fraction of a second before taking it. "You look different," she said with a nervous laugh. "So do you," I replied. We sat down, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was almost comforting, like both of us were measuring how much had changed, how much hadn't. She finally broke the ice. "I read about your company in that article. You've done really well for yourself." "I've been lucky," I said. She smiled faintly. "Luck has nothing to do with it. You were always smart. I should have seen that." That sentence hit me harder than I wanted it to, because back then, she didn't want to see it. She didn't care to. We talked for a while, about work, life, the city. I told her about my agency, the clients, the growth. She told me she'd been working at an architecture firm, but things weren't great. They'd downsized, and she was between jobs. Then, she laughed softly. "Crazy, isn't it? You used to clean the classrooms I studied in, and now you probably make more money than my boss did." I forced a polite smile, but inside, something twisted. The way she said it, like it was some amusing irony, not a story built on years of struggle, made me realize she still didn't get it. To her, it was a coincidence. To me, it was survival. She leaned in slightly. "You know, I've been thinking a lot about those days. I wasn't fair to you. That caught me off guard. I shouldn't have said what I said," she continued. "It was immature. I was stupid back then." I stayed quiet. I didn't trust myself to speak. Then she smiled, that same smile I remembered from the library. "Maybe we could start over. Get dinner sometime." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. The girl who once said she'd never date a cleaner was now asking me out, on her terms, in her world. I wanted to say no, to walk away and never look back. But curiosity won again. "Dinner sounds good," I said, keeping my tone even. "You choose the place." She picked a rooftop restaurant downtown, the kind where the plates are small, the portions smaller, and the check bigger than my rent used to be. I almost laughed when I saw the reservation under her name. When I arrived, she was already there, wearing a deep blue dress that looked effortless but definitely wasn't. She smiled when she saw me. Genuinely this time. The evening went smoothly, at least on the surface. We talked about our lives, our goals, our regrets, but under it all, there was tension. I could feel it, the unspoken awareness that time had flipped the script between us. At one point, she said, "You've really changed. You don't seem like the same guy." I smiled. "That's because I'm not." She laughed lightly. "No, I mean it in a good way. You're confident now. It's attractive." Her words should have made me feel something. Pride, maybe? But all I felt was emptiness, because as I looked at her, I realized something. I'd spent years chasing success, proving myself, climbing out of the pit she once shoved me into. But I wasn't sure I liked the man I'd become. She reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. I'm glad you're doing well, Adam. You deserve it. I wanted to believe her, but a small part of me couldn't. The dinner went on, and I found myself asking questions I hadn't planned to, about her life, her family, her dreams. She seemed lost, like she was still trying to figure out who she was supposed to be. Then, near the end of the night, she said something that froze me. You know what's funny? My dad used to say people like you never make it. Guess he was wrong. People like me. It wasn't the first time I'd heard that phrase, but hearing it from her lips again, after everything, made me realize that no matter how much success I had, she'd always see me as the cleaner who somehow got lucky. I forced a smile, paid the bill even though she'd offered, and walked her to her car. Thanks for dinner, she said softly. I'd like to see you again. I nodded but didn't commit. Take care, Lily. When she drove away, I stood in the parking lot, watching her taillights disappear into the night. And for the first time, I felt done. Not angry, not bitter, just done. That night, I went home and sat in my office. My company had just landed a huge client, a real estate group expanding across the state. They wanted full branding, digital campaigns, the works. It was a deal that could triple our revenue. And the contact person for the project, Lily's father. When I saw the name on the contract, my blood ran cold. Robert Walker, senior partner at ARW Developments, the same man who used to sneer at me when I mopped their foyer. I didn't know whether to laugh or panic. It was the same family that once decided I wasn't worth their daughter's time. Now, they needed me. And in that moment, I knew one thing for certain. The universe really did have a sense of humor. Because this time, I held the mop and the mirror, and I wasn't the same man anymore. I didn't sleep that night. I kept staring at the contract on my desk, my mind running through 100 different thoughts. Robert Walker, I remembered the name too well. Years ago, he was the one who'd given me that look of silent contempt every time I'd walked into their home with a mop bucket. I'd helped his wife with some cleaning gigs on weekends. He never said much, but his eyes did all the talking. You don't belong here. And now his company was reaching out to me. Not as help, not as a cleaner, but as the creative director of a firm he wanted to hire. The irony was so sharp it almost hurt. By morning, I'd made my decision. I wasn't going to let this be about revenge, not yet. This was business, and I was good at business now. The next week, my assistant scheduled a preliminary meeting with ARW Developments. When the day came, I put on my best suit, navy blue, tailored, and walked into their glass-paneled office with the kind of confidence I used to fake. The receptionist led me into a conference room. The walls were covered in architectural mock-ups, new towers, high-end residential buildings, cityscape dreams worth millions. It all screamed power. Then the door opened, and there he was, Robert Walker, older now, with gray streaking through his hair and a pair of glasses that made him look almost academic. But the arrogance, that never aged. Mr. Green, he said, offering a handshake. Pleasure to finally meet you. I've heard great things. His tone was polite, professional. He had no idea who I was. I smiled and shook his hand. Pleasure's mine, Mr. Walker. We went through the usual introductions, small talk, and business proposals. My team presented the pitch deck, a rebranding strategy that would modernize their image and align with younger buyers. Robert nodded approvingly through most of it, but when the meeting wrapped up, he asked if I could stay behind for a quick one-on-one. My team left, and the room suddenly felt colder. I have to say, he began, your presentation was impressive. You're clearly sharp. Self-made, I assume. I nodded. Yes, sir. From the ground up. Good, he said, almost with a smirk. I respect men who build themselves. I watched him carefully. The irony of that statement almost made me laugh. As I gathered my papers, I decided to test the waters. Funny, I said casually. I actually worked for your family once, years ago. Small cleaning gigs. You probably don't remember. He looked up sharply. For a brief second, I saw a flicker of recognition. Then it vanished. I see. Well, life takes us in unexpected directions, doesn't it? I smiled faintly. It does. That was the moment he realized who I was. I could tell the subtle tightening of his jaw, the shift in posture. But he didn't say a word. Good day, Mr. Walker, I said, gathering my laptop. He nodded, his expression unreadable. We'll be in touch. When I left the building, I felt something deep inside me. Not satisfaction exactly, but a strange, quiet power. For the first time in my life, I was on even ground with the man who once looked down at me. Over the next few weeks, my agency worked closely with ARW's marketing team. Emails, calls, design revisions. Robert was always polite but distant. Then one day, I got a text. It was from Lily. I didn't know you were working with my dad's company. He mentioned you today. I stared at the message. Of course he did. I replied, yeah, it's just business. She sent back, he seems impressed. That's rare. I'm happy for you. I didn't reply. But things took a turn faster than I expected. A few days later, I got a call from Robert himself. Mr. Green, he said, I'd like to invite you to dinner, just to discuss some details off the record. It wasn't unusual, clients did that sometimes. But with him, it felt like a test. When I arrived at the restaurant, he was already there. And to my surprise, Lily was with him. Hope you don't mind, he said with a thin smile. Lily insisted on joining. She says you two know each other. I kept my expression neutral. We go way back. Dinner started off civil, talk of business, marketing angles, numbers. But the undertone was personal, I could feel it. Robert was studying me, trying to figure out what my angle was. At one point, he leaned back and said, You've come a long way, Adam. From cleaning houses to running your own firm. Impressive, I smiled. Thank you. It's been a lot of work. He nodded slowly, then added, Still, success doesn't always change where we come from. Some people forget that. Lily frowned. Dad, don't, but I cut her off gently. Oh, I haven't forgotten, Mr. Walker. I just learned not to stay there. He looked at me for a long moment, then smiled. Good answer. The rest of the dinner went smoothly enough, but when it ended, and Lily and her father said their goodbyes, I knew something had shifted. That night, I got an email from ARW's legal department. They wanted to review the contract terms. It didn't take a genius to see what was happening. Robert was trying to squeeze me out, probably. Didn't like the idea of his daughter's ex-cleaner running his campaign, but what he didn't know was that my firm had already received interest from his biggest competitor, a rival development company that wanted the exact same brand. So when our tried to cut our deal short, I let it happen. I sent a polite, professional email thanking them for the opportunity. Then, a week later, I signed a full contract with their competition. Robert Walker's face must have gone pale when he saw the ads start popping up: billboards, bus stops, online campaigns, all featuring my agency's logo, promoting the rival company. It was poetic. But the real twist came a month later. I was invited to a local business gala. My firm was being recognized for excellence in emerging entrepreneurship. I wasn't going to go at first. Public events weren't really my thing, but something told me I should. When I arrived, the ballroom was filled with the kind of people who wore their wealth like armor. Flashy, loud, fake smiles everywhere. And among them, Robert and Lily. He spotted me before I could disappear, walked straight up, shook my hand, and said through clenched teeth, Congratulations, you've done well for yourself. Thank you, I said, smiling politely. Though I should probably thank you too. Your company taught me a lot, mostly about what not to do. Lily tried to change the subject, but it was too late. The tension was thick. Later that night, as people mingled and laughed, Lily found me by the bar. She looked different, nervous, uncertain. Adam, she said softly, you didn't have to do this. You could have walked away. I looked at her and said, I did walk away. But your father tried to drag me back, she sighed. He doesn't mean to be cruel. He just looks down on people he thinks are beneath him. I finished. She didn't answer. For a long moment, we just stood there, two people who had completely switched places. She'd once pitied me. Now she looked lost. And then she said something I didn't expect. Adam, I left my job. I want to start something new. Would you maybe consider helping me? I stared at her. Not in anger, not in disbelief, just quietly, because I realized something right then. Sometimes life doesn't give you revenge. It gives you a choice, and what I chose next would change everything for both of us. For days after the gala, I couldn't shake Lily's words. I want to start something new. Would you maybe consider helping me? It echoed in my head like an unfinished sentence. I didn't know if it was guilt, pride, or something else entirely. But the idea lingered. The next morning, I found myself rereading old texts from her from years ago. when we'd been just two kids from opposite worlds. She'd always been kind, even when her father wasn't. But kindness wasn't enough to erase the way things had ended. She had gone silent after her family moved away. After that day when her father fired my mother over something trivial, a broken vase, I think. It hadn't even been her fault, but he'd needed someone to blame, and people like us were always the easiest targets. I'd promised myself then that one day, I'd make him see me differently. Not as help, not as charity, but as an equal. And now that I had the chance, I didn't know if I even wanted it. Still, curiosity got the better of me. A week later, I texted her back, "Let's talk." "Coffee," she replied almost instantly. "Tomorrow? 10 a.m. The old cafe near Main Street. The same cafe where we used to sit years ago, before everything changed." When I walked in, she was already there. Dressed simply, jeans, a beige sweater, hair pulled back, nothing like the polished image of her father's world. She looked nervous but determined. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey." We sat, ordered coffee. The silence was thick at first, then she broke it. "I know what you're thinking," she said. "That I'm just here because things went south with my dad. And you're not wrong. But it's more than that. I can't do it anymore, pretending everything's perfect while watching him step on people to stay on top." I didn't say anything. I just let her talk. "I want to build something that actually matters. Something honest. But I don't have your business sense, Adam. I've seen what you've built. I thought maybe you want to partner up." I interrupted. She nodded. "Yes. I know it's asking a lot after everything that happened, but I mean it. I believe in what you're doing." I leaned back, studying her face. There was sincerity there, real sincerity. "Lily," I said carefully, "if you want to start something because you believe in it, I'll help. But if this is about proving something to your father, count me out." She looked down. "It's not about him anymore." That was all I needed to hear. So we started meeting regularly, first at coffee shops, then at my office. She had ideas, good ones actually, about social outreach, sustainable housing projects, youth programs linked with city development. She wanted to blend architecture, community, and marketing into something that actually served people, not just shareholders. I respected that. Slowly, we started mapping out a plan, a joint initiative under my firm's umbrella. She handled the social projects. I took care of branding and logistics. But word travels fast. And it didn't take long before Robert Walker found out. The phone call came late one night. "Adam," his voice snapped through the speaker. "I'm going to ask you this once. Are you working with my daughter?" I hesitated. "Yes, professionally." He let out a sharp laugh. "Professionally? You think I don't know what this is? You're trying to humiliate me. You think because you got lucky, you're on my level." "I don't need to be on your level," I said calmly. "I just need to do good work." "You're making a mistake," he growled. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." I could hear the threat beneath his words, the kind of arrogance that came from a man who'd never been told no. But this time, I didn't flinch. "Good night, Mr. Walker," I said, and hung up. Lily was furious when she found out about the call. "He doesn't get to control this anymore," she said. "He's already called my mother, my brother, even tried to freeze some of my accounts. I won't let him win." Her determination reminded me of something I'd forgotten. That courage wasn't loud. It was steady. Over the next few months, our project started to take shape. We called it Havenworks, a collaborative program connecting developers, nonprofits, and local artists to revitalize abandoned spaces into community centers. We pitched it to sponsors, city councils, investors. Slowly, it gained traction, and every success made Robert's silence louder. Then came the day of the public launch. It was held in a refurbished factory downtown, one of our first renovation sites. Journalists, officials, business owners, the whole place buzzed with energy. As I was about to go on stage, my assistant whispered, "Adam, he's here." I didn't have to ask who. Robert Walker stood near the back, watching. No entourage, no press, just him, arms crossed, face unreadable. Lily saw him too. She froze for a moment, then whispered, "Let's just do this." We walked on stage together. She gave the opening speech, powerful, poised, full of hope. When she finished, I took the mic. I talked about opportunity, dignity, and how every person deserves a place to build their future, no matter where they start. I didn't name names, but everyone in the room knew what I meant. When the applause started, I looked at the back of the hall. Robert wasn't clapping, but he wasn't leaving either. Afterward, as guests mingled, he approached me, slowly. "I'll admit," he said, "I didn't expect this. It's impressive. Thank you, I said. He looked at Lily, then back at me. She's stubborn. Always has been. Reminds me of her mother. For the first time, his voice didn't sound like stone. Then he sighed. You've made your point. You're not the same kid who used to sweep my floors. I met his gaze. I never was. You just couldn't see it. He nodded slowly. Maybe not. But I see it now. It wasn't an apology. But it was something close, and coming from him, that was almost enough. He turned to leave, but before he did, he said quietly, take care of her. She believes in you. And just like that, the man who once dismissed me as nothing walked away, smaller somehow. Not in stature but in certainty. Lily came over, eyes wet but smiling. Did that just happen? Yeah, I said softly. It did. That night, after everyone had gone, we stood on the balcony overlooking the city. You know, she said, when I asked you to help me, I wasn't sure you'd say yes. I smiled faintly. Honestly, neither was I. She looked at me, then asked, so what now? I took a deep breath, the city lights reflecting off her face. Now, I said, we build something that lasts. Not for revenge. Not for him. For us. She nodded. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace, but peace never lasts long. Because just as I thought everything was finally settling, a new partnership, a new chapter, an email came in that would change everything. It was from an anonymous sender. Subject line. You don't know what she's hiding. Asterisk. The subject line sat on my screen for a good 10 minutes before I opened it. My pulse drummed in my ears. The room felt too quiet, too still. I had been through enough in my life to know that when something finally starts going right, the universe tends to check your confidence. And this email, it felt like that check. When I finally clicked it open, I expected some scam or a prank. But what I saw made my throat go dry. There were 3 attachments. Each was a photo screenshots, blurry but legible. The first was a bank transaction record. It showed a transfer made from a company account Havenworks to an unknown consulting firm. The amount wasn't small either. The second screenshot showed that same firm listed as a contractor on a government bidding site. And the third was a selfie of Lily, smiling in front of a real estate logo with that firm's name behind her. The text below the images said only, "You built your empire on lies. She's using you. Ask her about Crestline Group." I sat there, staring at the screen until my vision blurred. Part of me wanted to delete it, pretend I'd never seen it. But that small, sharp instinct that had gotten me this far whispered no. The next morning, Lily showed up to our office bright and early, holding 2 coffees and a grin. "Morning, boss," she said playfully. "Ready for another day of saving the world?" I smiled faintly, but it didn't reach my eyes. "We need to talk." Her face fell. "Okay, what's going on?" I turned my monitor so she could see the email. "Do you know anything about this?" Her expression froze. She didn't even try to fake surprise. "Adam," she said quietly, "I can explain, then do it." Asterisk. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. "When I came to you that day, I was already involved with Crestline. My father wanted me to lead a charitable front for the company to clean up its reputation. I didn't want to, but he said if I didn't, he'd cut me off completely. So I signed some preliminary paperwork with them. Nothing serious. But when I saw what you were doing, what we could build, I walked away from Crestline. Then why is there money from our account going to them?" I asked. She swallowed hard. "Because when they found out I left, they threatened to expose my name and the fact that I used their resources to pitch some of our initial proposals. They said it'd ruin you, too. So I paid them off, quietly. I thought it was over." Her voice broke a little at the end, but I couldn't tell if it was guilt or fear. "You should have told me," I said flatly. "I know," she whispered. "But after everything, after how much I hurt you years ago, I didn't want to lose your trust again." I wanted to believe her. God, I really did. But the scars of being used and underestimated ran deep. I told her I needed time to think and asked her to leave early. The moment the door closed, I called our accountant. We dug into every transaction, every file. And the deeper we went, the more tangled it got. Crestline had funneled over $180,000 through various consulting invoices tied to our joint initiatives. If what Lily said was true, that she paid them off, it meant they'd been blackmailing her for months. But if it wasn't true, it meant she'd been lying from the start. That night, I didn't go home. I sat in the office, replaying everything, every look, every apology, every late-night text about making things right. The next morning, I confronted her again. "Why didn't you just tell me from the beginning?" I asked. She looked exhausted. Because you would have walked away. Maybe, I said. But at least it would have been honest. Tears welled in her eyes. I'm not my father, Adam. I made a mistake. I was trying to fix it. Please don't let them take this from us. And maybe it was that finally cracked through my anger. Because she was right about one thing, the project didn't matter. It wasn't just business. It was proof that people like me could build something lasting. So instead of cutting ties, I called a lawyer. Together, we decided to go public before Crestline could twist the narrative. A week later, I stood at a press conference, Lily by my side. Cameras flashed. I laid out everything. How we'd been approached by a firm trying to manipulate us. How they'd exploited old connections. How we refused to let corruption hide behind charity. I didn't name names, but I didn't need to. Everyone in that industry knew exactly who ran Crestline Group. That evening, the story went viral. Former cleaner exposes major corporate cover-up. That was one headline. Another said, fallen heiress turns on her father's empire. Within days, Robert Walker's empire began to crumble. Investigations, lawsuits, public outrage. It was chaos. Lily, for her part, stood tall through it all. She could have hidden. She didn't. She faced the cameras, took the blame where it was hers, and didn't flinch when the world turned its eyes on her. A few weeks later, I got a letter. No sender name, no return address. Just a short note inside. You won. Don't waste it. RW. I stared at those two initials for a long time. Maybe it was an admission of defeat. Maybe it was something like respect. Either way, it felt like closure. 2 years passed. Havenworks grew beyond anything I'd imagined. We expanded into 5 cities, built dozens of community centers, helped thousands of families find work and stability. And every time someone asked how it all started, I smiled and said, with a girl who told me I wasn't enough, and the day I proved her wrong. Lily and I never became a couple. We tried, briefly, but we were too tied to the ghosts of who we used to be. Still, we stayed partners, friends, allies. She'd earned her redemption, and I'd earned my peace. Sometimes I catch her staring at me when we're at meetings, and she smirk and say, remember when I said I wouldn't date the cleaner? And I'll laugh, because that version of me, the boy sweeping floors, feeling invisible, he's still there somewhere. But now he's part of something bigger. Now, when I walk past the old building where it all began, the one where my mom used to clean, I stop for a moment. It's been turned into a youth center under Havenworks. The floors are polished, the walls covered in murals painted by local kids. And in the reflection of the glass door, I sometimes catch sight of myself. Not the cleaner, not the executive, just a man who stopped letting other people define his worth. I still think about that day she said those words, I won't date the cleaner. It hurt, yes, but it also built me. It forced me to see that my value wasn't something anyone could take away. Not even her. And if I could go back to that moment, to that young, humiliated kid holding a mop, I'd whisper just one thing in his ear, don't worry, you'll thank her someday. Because I did. Because in the end, her rejection wasn't my downfall. It was my beginning.